Yes.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to this sitting of the Supreme Court of Jamaica, which we mark a very significant event in the life of the court and also in the life of the Honorable Mr. Justice Glenn Brown, who has been a judge of this court since April 2009. We know that he is a gentleman who hails from the East Parish of St. Thomas, and beckoning finger of the law called him as early as in 1972. He's at Cave Hill University of the West Indies, where he completed his law degree and then on to the Norman Manley Law School, Certificate of Legal Education, and admitted to the bar October 3, 1977. And just prior to that, he had commenced employment the Deputy Clerk of Court in September 1977 to October 1978. And yes, in those days, attorneys at law were indeed employed as Deputy Clerk of Court. Then he was a Clerk of Court 1978 to 1981. Then he went to the Attorney General's chambers, and in 1987, having become an Assistant Attorney General, he began his judicial career as a resident magistrate, as the parish courts, as the judges of the parish courts were known at the time. And his career saw him in St. James, Clarendon, Westmoreland, and St. Andrew. And during his time as a resident magistrate, went on the United States State Department's Visitors Program in 1999. And then he was appointed a judge of this court in April of 2009. Now, we take note of the presence of family, without whom he would not have been able to dedicate himself to the service of the law and to the service of the people of Jamaica for these many years. He has contributed not just to the rule of law, but as all judicial officers, to contribute to the concept of what I like to call these days constitutionalism and strengthening separation of powers and triumph of the rule of law over the rule of men. Being a judicial officer is very demanding, requires long hours at night, reading and preparing for the following day's hearing or a matter that is continuing, reviewing the evidence, and then to bring, as we like to say in the trial courts, the trial court judges bring order out of chaos. Because we know that trials can be very chaotic affairs. And so all of what has been said or not said is then distilled into reasoned judgment and telescopes into an order. And so Justice Brown has been engaged in that exercise for the better part of his life. He has also contributed to the welfare of his colleagues. His preoccupation with working conditions, salaries, and other conditions of service are near and dear to his heart, and he never loses an opportunity to press the case for improvements in those areas. And so that has manifested itself in various ways. For example, with the introduction of the orderlies here at the Supreme Court. And for many years he has been, shall I say, to borrow this American expression, the ranking member of the salaries of Commission of the Judiciary. And because of his long institutional memory, he has been able to make very significant and telling contributions in that regard. So we will miss those reminders of what things ought to be and how they were. We'll miss his recounting of encounters between lawyers and judges of yesteryear. And well, I said yesteryear, and I won't say to Mr. Knight that my eyes are lighted on him. But what I will say is that it is good to see Mr. Knight, Queen's Counsel, and it's a measure of the esteem with which our dear brother is held, that Mr. Knight, who we have not seen in these courts for, shall I say, too long, has seen it fit to be here this morning. And as I continue, I wish to acknowledge the attendance of the former Chief Justice, Honorable Mrs. Justice Zayla McCalla, a good friend of Justice Glenn Brown and colleagues together as judges for a very long time, and to welcome all the other judges who are here looking on via Zoom, and the senior puisne judge who will be making her contribution to this important event in a very short while. So, I'm sure you all didn't come here to hear me speak at length. And so I will now invite the senior puisne judge, the Honorable Mrs. Justice Carol Lawrence Basic, joining us, who has joined us via Zoom, to make her contribution. P. Just a moment, the sound isn't coming through. That Senior Pune is muted on her side.
No.
Oh, right, we're hearing it. Yes. Vagaries of technology.
Justice Glenworth Brown, it is evident that he is well appreciated, judging from the esteemed persons who have chosen to attend this function to mark the occasion. I recognize in particular the presence of the Honorable Chief Justice, Mr. Justice Sykes, the former Chief Justice, the Honorable Mrs. Justice McCalla, the Honorable President of the Court of Appeal, Mr. Justice Brooks, learned judges of the Court of Appeal and of the Supreme Court, the masters, the registrars, parish court judges, attorneys at law, and courts office staff, police officers, probation officers from all around the island, among other distinguished guests, in person, on Zoom, and watching on the YouTube. Nothing, not even a global pandemic, could thwart our efforts to celebrate this milestone in Justice Brown's life. And so we have gratefully embraced technology to allow for the celebration to occur. Ironically, this has resulted in far more persons joining us than would normally have been able to attend were the function in person only. For example, I thought I would surprise Justice Brown by inviting some of the Hanover bench, bar, and office staff to join us by Zoom from Hanover, which is where I currently am, presiding in the Hanover circuit. And I know there is a feed coming directly from the parish court room. To say he is loved over here in the West is an understatement. He has proven himself to be indeed the king of the West, having spent countless years presiding in the courts of the western section of the island, both as resident magistrate and as puisne judge. He it was who put to good use community service orders and thereby almost single-handedly removed from the beaches of Negril persons who harassed the tourists and found instead worthwhile occupation for them. Justice Brown is well known for the open lines of communication he maintains with persons who form a part of the justice system. And I know that he is particularly pleased that they are able to witness and share in this occasion. One of Justice Brown's endearing qualities is his willingness to give advice in almost all areas touching and concerning the administration of justice. His advice is genuine. His information is accurate and true. That combination causes many to flock to him to obtain his reasoned opinion about a myriad of work-related issues. He treats with his colleagues in a down-to-earth manner, and the ease with which he can be approached and the warmth of his reception have not gone unnoticed. And these attributes no doubt account for why so many are present this morning wanting to be a part of the tribute. Indeed, persons have traveled many miles to participate. I believe that the contributions from our distinguished speakers will treat us to a comprehensive synopsis of Justice Brown's professional life. He was as comfortable in the civil arena as he was in the criminal sphere. and he always had ideas for the improvement of the system. One such improvement I can think of, for example, is the presence of orderlies for the Supreme Court judges. He campaigned for that for decades, and we now wonder how we could have operated without their assistance. He it was also who continually advocated for a court sheet to be used in the circuit courts so that there would be a readily accessible record of the proceedings without having to rely on the endorsement on the individual files. That facility has proved its worth time and time again and exemplifies his focus on improving the system. But before I close, I must mention that in his private life, he has also excelled. I quote and adopt the words of his late mother-in-law, Miss Jackie, who described him as a decent person, one whose voice she had never heard raised. It does not get much better than an endorsement from one's mother-in-law, except perhaps the endorsement of one's wife and children. In that regard, I speak confidently when I say that his dear wife, Yvette, has enjoyed the decades of married life they have shared. And though being a strong professional in her own right, she respects his calm, reasoned counsel in her life and in the life of their successful and adoring children. She appreciates his constant focus in ensuring their comfort, safety, and happiness. I conclude by wishing for my friend and colleague, Justice Glenn Brown, good health and immeasurable happiness in his retirement. He has left the system better than he found it, and that in and of itself tells the story of a professional life well spent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senior Puny Judge. And the sentiments that she has expressed is more eloquent than I could possibly have done. We now call upon Ms. Paula Llewellyn, King's Counsel, Director of Public Prosecutions.
Thank you very much. May it please you, Chief Justice, judges of the Supreme Court, judges of the Court of Appeal, and out there in the virtual world, members of the court staff around Jamaica who are listening in and watching, members of the public, and may I say, my dear friend and classmate, Mrs. Yvette Dawn Brown, who is present in the courtroom here, a member of the class of 1984 from the law school, and one of our beloved batchmates. And of course, the gentleman, Mr. Justice Glenn Brown. I speak on behalf of the members of staff of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, and dare I say to your colleague judges, the Chief Justice and Mr. Justice Glenn Brown, the first thing that I've heard from all the persons that I've spoken of, oh my goodness, there goes Mr. Brown. All those guilty pleas that we used to get, because when, should I say, especially as the czar of the court division in the western section of the island, when the attorneys at the private bar and crown prosecutors knew that Mr. Brown was going to be around, we knew that we had to be at the top of our game, because the guilty pleas would be coming through the pack with the attorneys who somehow could always be persuaded very easily by Mr. Justice Brown with just a look of his eye, a cryptic comment, a moment of levity, or when they all went into chambers with Crown Counsel, everybody, he was very no-nonsense. And I think even before criminal case management came around, he had his own brand and style of making sure that neither defense counsel nor prosecuting counsel wasted any time. And certainly we knew, certainly at the office of the DPP, that you were either going to put up or shut up. So it's either you had a case or you didn't have a case. And if you didn't have a case, there must be no dithering in respect of whether to make a decision to offer no evidence or to enter a nolle. So we certainly will miss Mr. Justice Glenn Brown, and I wish to let him know that we will remember a lot of his common sense guidelines to us. And Chief Justice, as you spoke about the fact that Mr. Brown was well known, dare I say, these are my words, to be the unofficial trade union representative of the judiciary. He did not ever, he was not mean with that. He would share that sort of concern about working conditions in respect of court reporters, court staff, and prosecutors. And he would not hesitate to seek to motivate you to see to your interests, because with his legendary institutional memory. In fact, Mr. Justice Brown, I hope you are going to write a book in your retirement. We can't have all that institutional memory going by the wayside. But on behalf of my staff, I would wish to say thank you. You have, another thing we share, cricket, you have played a magnificent innings. And dare I say, because of this institutional memory, and because you will constantly be engaged in looking out for the welfare of your colleague judges, retired judges, prosecutors, court reporters, court staff, I know that we can still call you if we need any advice in respect of what is the best way to go through, go on top of, or go around the bureaucracy to make sure that our interests are looked after. As for his disposition and temperament, respectful, and I got these from different Crown Counsel. Tell me what words come to your mind when you think of Mr. Justice Glenn Brown. Respectful, easygoing, no nonsense, would be unorthodox, as in thinking outside of the box to get the work done, or to remove any wall that has been placed either by the prosecutor or defense counsel in respect of getting the work done. Facilitatory, and also having a great sense of humor. But in terms of his ability to be measured, you could always depend on him to make sure that if, for example, my learned friend, Mrs. Nita Robertson, and I meet in court and there's too much passion being shown in the courtroom, not only would we get the eye, but in the twinkling of that eye, he would make sure that we know, not in his court. And we usually, I think I can speak on behalf of Mrs. Nita Robertson, we would stand to attention and make sure that we behave according to the strictures of the profession. I also wish to pay tribute to my classmate, Mrs. Yvette Dawn Brown, because I was privileged to have been at the wedding, and around the anniversary, which coincides with just 1 or 2 days after my birthday in September, When Yvette is saying happy birthday to me, I would also say happy anniversary. And I know that Yvette has been a wonderful companion and very steadfast in the support of Mr. Justice Glenn Brown's career, as he has in respect of her career. So I wish them all the very best on behalf of the staff and myself, and I look forward, Mr. Justice Brown, to you writing that book that will capture all that institutional memory that goes way back as an old courts officer right up to your career as a judicial officer. Walk good, and I know that whether it is on the cricket, in the cricket stands or somewhere else that is more salubrious than the courtroom, we will meet again. All the very best to you, sir, and to your family in your retirement. May it please you.
Thank you very much, Director. And we now invite AD Knight, Queen's Counsel, former Minister of Security and former Minister of Justice. Is he the only person to have both portfolios combined? Maybe, but certainly not since his time. Right.
My Lord Chief Justice, I'm unaccustomed to speak through these things. I thought of not wearing one this morning, but after I looked at myself in the mirror, I thought that I should. My lords and my ladies, former Chief Justice, and His Lordship, Mr. Glenn Brown, greetings. And of course, I have to mention his dear wife, who I know as a prosecutor at Sutton Street. But the better days came later when I happened to have had a relationship with the Urban Development Corporation, where she was Mrs. UDC. My lords, my ladies, I speak about His Lordship Mr. Glenn Brown in three capacities. One, as a citizen. Secondly, as a former minister, and your Lordship made reference to my holding that office of Minister of National Security, Justice. And I speak as counsel. And in all three of those, I speak as a friend, because I regard you as one of my friends. Of course, there are times when I thought not. And I will tell you at a later stage when. I speak as a citizen, as one who is passionate about justice. And when I listen to voices outside of the legal profession who know you, they say that their impression of you was that as you adjudicated, you're a man with justice. and as a citizen, I am overjoyed when that is said about a member of the bench. I speak as a former Minister of National Security and Justice, where, you mentioned this trade unionist, and that he was a trade unionist. He was always making representations then on behalf of the magistrates. And if there was ever a meeting at the ministry that had to do with magistrates and their welfare, when the permanent secretary would say to me, let's prepare for that meeting, one of the first things I would ask is, oh Jesus, is Glenn Brown coming? And when she would answer yes, I knew I had to be well prepared. But there was something about him that I liked. He was forthright, he was strong in his advocacy, but he was reasonable. And once it was felt that we could not accommodate that which he wanted, then we could move on, because we could always depend on him to understand some of the difficulties and to keep that advocacy for another time. I also recall when I held that portfolio that we were setting up a new court in Jamaica, pursuant to a new act of parliament that had been promulgated. The Drug Court Treatment and Rehabilitation Act, which established the drug courts. At the time when they were established, there were only 2 jurisdictions in the world that had. New Zealand and the United States of America had 2 of their states, they had it. And I recall that Mr. Justice Brown was instrumental in helping us to set those courts up. One was in his territory, or his former territory, I think it was then, in the West. And someone mentioned him being really the ruler of the West. Belatedly, Mr. Brown, I thank you for approving my visa applications on so many times. Because one could not go to Mobile unless, as a lawyer, you're coming to Mobile and Mr. Glenn Brown doesn't know you're crazy. And you were instrumental in setting up those courts, one in Mobile and one at Halfway Tree. I speak of you as counsel because your illustrious career was outlined by the Chief Justice. And I recall well when you went to Sutton Street as a magistrate. You were in what was then Court 1. And you were really coming from civil chambers. And there you were in a criminal court. But you had been prepared for that because you started your career as a prosecutor at the criminal bar, public bar. And I think it was in days when I don't know how to describe it, but some may say that I was a fiery young fella. And almost there was a flame, but as if you understood human behavior so well, you smiled. And as you smiled, I was disarmed, but unhappy. And as the matter went on, I realized that here was the making of a fine adjudicator. And all my colleagues with whom I've spoken have said that your jury mind was excellent. And they tell me that that was so because you were a man of the people. You understood the average Jamaican. And so you could analyze any evidence given. As counsel, I too found that to be so. Because I appeared with you after I had left that other arena. I appeared before you, and I remember well a case in Manchester. I went there knowing that the client, yes, Miss Doyle, knowing that the client was innocent. And hoping that that would be so at the end. And I kept reading your face. And there were times when I knew that the client would walk free. And as I started to celebrate, you would ask a question that cast some doubt in my mind. Then I realized that what you were doing, you were assessing as you were going along. And you were using your experience to explore all the evidence that had been led so that you could come to a just conclusion. May I tell you, my Lord, that when you found the client not guilty, I said to myself, I was right all along. But you have had an illustrious career. But there's another side of you. And that side is your love for cricket, as has been said, and your love for dominoes. I have heard that many have suffered. I recall when we used to have these seminars at Braco. So soon as we had closed the final session, the dominoes would start. And I would want you to be my partner because I thought that you were an excellent domino player. I didn't want you to be my partner because I felt that, with you I'd win. But I saw in you such talent that I wanted to pass on some of my own expertise to you. But we enjoyed those seminars. And the final thing I want to say, since I'm told I have only 50 minutes, is that there is a saying, as sober as a judge. I've always thought about it. Sober as a judge. And I recall, St. Dan, that I kept close to you because I wanted to find out what it meant. Then one night, I don't know, some persons started to have drinks, and we joined them. And after I had had quite a few, I think I was leaving the realm of sobriety. But I looked at you, and as I looked at you, your demeanor hadn't changed. And I said, no, I understand. It is not the amount that you have. It's your calling, because you remained as sober as a judge. So, Justice Brown, I hope that all your experience that you have gained, all that you have done for the profession, all that you have done for the magistracy, all that you have done for the higher level court bench is not now going to be thrown aside, and that the powers that be will see it fit to ensure that you keep on participating in the development of the country through further contribution to the justice system. And Chief Justice, were it left to me, had I the authority, which could be conferred on me by you all, the Justice Training Institute can be a noble institution, and it can be used to the development of the justice system in all its various areas. Were I the one with the authority, I would ask Mr. Justice Brown to become Dean of the Justice Training Institute, because it can do a lot to bring about some of the changes which I know, Chief Justice, you want in the system. I wish you well, my Lord Brown. I do hope we will meet over at domino table, and that somewhere around there I will be able to test myself again, and I know you will remain sober as a judge. Fare thee well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Knight. And as we invite Michael Hilton, Queen's Counsel, we'll recognize the present former Director of Public Prosecutions. My ophthalmologist prescribed the right pair of glasses so I can see the screen very well. So Mr. Ken Pantry, Queen's Counsel, and also former Attorney General, Miss Dorothy Lightburn, Queen's Counsel. I acknowledge your presence here electronically. Yes, Mr. Hilton.
My Lord Chief Justice, my ladies, my lords, present both in person here today and virtually, especially my Lord, Mr. Justice Glenn Brown, Mrs. Brown and family. At this function, to mark the retirement of Honorable Glenn Brown, I have been permitted the honor of saying a few words in capacity as a representative of the General Legal Counsel and as someone who has known Justice Brown personally, and let me say for a few years. The Legal Profession Act created the General Legal Counsel and gave it functions. First, organizing legal education, and second, upholding standards of professional conduct. My Lord, Justice Brown could have been the counsel's representative on the bench, because he seemingly took it upon himself to have those two as his personal mandates. Like the counsel, Justice Brown recognized that legal education does not end on graduation from law school. Always found time to guide and mentor young counsel, both from the bench and off it. And he knew that older counsel would also sometimes need that guidance. Justice Brown, therefore, also assisted the counsel to carry out the second part of its mandate. The counsel would be comfortable appearing before him, but if they did not know before, they would quickly learn that there are boundaries. This is because Justice Brown wasn't shy to be known as an old school, no-nonsense judge. In fact, my Lord Chief Justice, Justice Brown isn't shy about many things, but that's another story for another place. In 2019, the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago brought an action against the Prime Minister of that republic in matters relating to the. And in the judgment delivered a few months ago, Justice Corcoran said, personal qualities, conduct, and image that a judge projects affect those of the judicial system as a whole, and therefore the confidence that the public places in it. Maintaining confidence on the part of the public in its justice system ensures its effectiveness and proper functioning. But beyond that, public confidence promotes general welfare and social peace by maintaining the rule of law. My Lords, Justice Glenn Brown's bearing and judicial demeanor always inspired that confidence. And this did not start in 1987, when he first went on the bench. He was always a leader. In the same year that the Legal Profession Act came into force and created the General Legal Counsel, a group of Jamaican law students moved into a house in Black Rock, near to the Caveville campus. Glenn Brown was not the oldest or most senior of the group, but he immediately took charge. Collected money from the other students for the running of the house. He assigned them responsibilities. And I won't expose the jobs that the others had, you know who you are. My primary task was washing dishes. Glenn Brown's primary task was assigning tasks. But no one argued because he had the judicial demeanor from then. And my lords, if you would permit me an even more personal note. On the night that I came of age, Glenn took me to a certain place known as Baxter's Road for a drink. He told me that I was now old enough to go to Baxter's Road. Pretended to be the older brother I never had, and I pretended that I was going to Baxter's Road for the first time. Glenn and I were also part of a small group that met regularly for more than 40 years to exchange ideas, dreams, and sometimes resources. We followed Glenn's career with pride. Some members of that group have passed away, others have migrated, but Ken Pantry and Keith Chamberlain are joining us here today, sharing this tribute. They have asked me to congratulate Justice Brown on an excellent inning. Justice Brown would not hear my matters, but he was always accessible and willing to take on emergency, last-minute application. And while he would probably not win any competition for the most or the longest written judgments, you also won't find his name on any list of judges with long outstanding judgments. My lords, that is because he was decisive, sound, practical, and most of all, and he was the same person on the bench as he was off it. A few weeks ago, I ran into another distinguished judge who had recently retired. And I asked him what retirement feels like. He said he didn't know because he was as busy as ever. I suspect that the same will be true of Justice Glenn Brown. Qualities that he displayed on the bench, I expect will keep him very busy off it. So Justice Brown, congratulations and thank you for your contribution to the judiciary, the profession, and to the development of the many people, including me, whose lives you touched. Enjoy this next phase of your life, my friend. All good. My Lord.
Thank you very much.
My Lord, Justice, before I take my seat, if I may convey the apologies of the learned director, who indicated she was due to return to the Court of Appeal.
Robertson, counsel.
My Lord Chief Justice, other justices, colleagues, counsel, and most importantly, Justice Glenn Brown. We are assembled here today to witness his retirement from an illustrious career. I must tell you that I could literally say ditto, I see. And I did not speak to any of the persons who have spoken. Clearly, we all agree on all the things that have been said, but I will say them nevertheless. Born and grown in rural Jamaica, Mr. Justice Glenn Brown has kept his common touch of life in Jamaica, culture, or people. Those qualities and experiences of the ordinary Jamaican have been the hallmark of his strengths as a judge. One of his outstanding features is that he fully understands and recognizes the impact that justice has on our citizens. Because of that strength, he has had the ability to sense of matters, cut through stuff and chatter, and identifies the root of the matter, counsel at that point. Understands clearly that mercy tempers justice and applies it appropriately, often, and with humor. Restorative justice, long before the concept was formalized in our justice, was a part of his way of thinking. He was firm, but never unkind to counsel. One of his strengths was that he was balanced in his knowledge of all aspects of the law, civil and criminal, and this resulted from his early years as a clerk of courts and at the Attorney General's department and his years on the bench as a resident. Known for his knowledge of court procedure and practice in the RM courts, and while sitting as magistrate, was constant in guiding, assisting, and the imparting of knowledge to all counsel, in particular the clerks and deputy clerks of the court. Always, always helpful to counsel. Ask his assistant, ignorant of or in doubt about the operation of the resident magistrate. An authority in that regard. I never told him this, but I will tell him now. Those of us who knew him well, he appeared before him, was the hardest. For a while, we never quite knew why, but eventually found out that the standards of service and performance he set for himself expected us to live up to them, expected the best from us. And I personally want to thank him for that, as it has guided all our careers and mine. A lot of people would not know, but he and my first husband, Maurice Wilson, grew up in the same community and went to this, and they were best friends. When I appeared before Mr. Justice Brown, it was objective as could be, but take advantage of, and he tempered my passion from time to time, and I am grateful. I believe, Glenn, if you permit me, that Maurice would have been proud of you. Mr. Justice Brown, your legacy, the law and upper courts, have resulted in admiration, abounding affection, and respect from members of the bar. Your unselfishness and humility, exemplified in and out of court, will always be remembered. You never sought to elevate yourself, and in some instances, you stepped back to allow your colleagues. Your constant and resolute commitment to justice, marked as is exemplified by all the persons who spoke before. We envy you, but will one day join you in retirement, some sooner than others. There are no goodbyes for us, and we hope at least some of us will regularly at the Domino. For myself, it will always be the epitome of what I in good trial judge. Thank you for serving.
Very much, Queen's Counsel. Now here via Zoom, this is Roger Gibson.
If it pleases the court, judges of the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court, parish court judges, colleagues, and of course, Justice Glenn Brown. I thank you, my Lord Chief Justice, for allowing me to join in paying homage to the Honorable Mr. Justice Glenn Brown. An oft-quoted verse from Rudyard Kipling's poem, If, succinctly captures the character of Justice Brown. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiven minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. So this man arrived at the St. James Resident Magistrates Court, Montego Bay, for the first of two stints in 1988. There he remained until 1991. That period covered my final year as a student of history and government at the UA and my 2 years at the Faculty of Law. It was during this period that I met Justice Brown. I was a temporary assistant, CR3, summers only at the said court. As I always say, I tend to be easily bored, And so, having mastered all the paperwork in the office, I wanted to go to court. Every year it's all the same. I was told that the judges are unapproachable, had no time for me, and I should sit and do what I was assigned to do. But my desire to be in court to understand and witness what I thought was real law continued to burn. So from afar, Justice Brown is hard to read. So for a moment, I believed he was in fact unapproachable and wondered how to make the approach. However, a friendly whisper told me that it was okay to approach him for permission to sit in court, both circuit and also in the civil and criminal courts where he presided. Eventually, I went to him, and to my surprise, his seemingly stern demeanor is all a facade. He is just a principled person in that he acts with integrity and honesty and with a strong sense of fairness, justice, and respect for dignity. After I explained my interest to him, he became my mentor, as he has been to so many others after me. In that role, he imparted invaluable lessons which helped me to shape my career. I was more decisive as to the path I would take after law school. Not where I'm now, but that's for another time. My first trial was done before him. I was very nervous, but he guided me along without interfering. And I'm pleased to say that I secured my first conviction then and before him. Through his mentoring, I also acquired a most formidable secret weapon, the pink summons, which in turn, in my early years in practice, earned me an equally formidable and unlikely friend, R.B. Manderson Jones. And perhaps among the judges now, he would only be known in terms of his idiosyncrasies to President Brooks and probably Justices Batts and Pusey. To put him in context, he was like a grumpy old man. He did not have a secretary. He served his documents himself. You place documents under his door, and if he speaks to you on the telephone, it's on his terms. He was quite a character. But he became an unexpected friend of mine in his way after I deployed the pink summons on him. He had never heard of it before. And though he was very bright, it took him by surprise. He was initially incredulous when I explained the process to him. Thank you, Justice Brown, for making me look and feel smart. The admiration of the likes of Manderson Jones meant a lot to any young counsel back then. This knowledge was empowering, as I have since imparted that knowledge to several grateful colleagues. So Justice Brown is mentor and exemplar. Justice Brown also epitomizes the meaning of community, the common touch, and the resident magistrate. As you have heard, he was a resident in Montego Bay, as a resident magistrate should be. He was a part of the community. He would be out and about in the streets, no orderly. Everyone in town knew him, whether they called him Judge Brown, the serious judge, or Judge Dredd. Nevertheless, the general sentiment there was that he was even-handed, just, practical, but no nonsense. So Ronald Paris, my colleague, was right when he shared that Justice Brown has the common touch, even though he is a judge. Justice Brown, he wishes to convey that you will be missed, that you are an honorable man who, Sinatra style, did things your way. Justice Glenworth Brown, as you exit stage left, be satisfied that your contribution to the judiciary, to aspirational persons such as me, and to the overall administration of justice was appreciated. As I watched the Olympics opening ceremony this morning, I thought of Paul's letter to Timothy as a fitting close to your innings. You have fought the good fight. You have finished the race. You have kept the faith. I too salute you and thank you, if it pleases the court.
Very much, Queen's Counsel. I will invite the still new president of the bar, Alexander Williams. My Lord Chief Justice, Lord President of the Court of Appeal, Lords and ladies, family of Lordship Brown, I have the task this morning to speak on this August occasion on behalf of the Jamaican Bar Association. If I might begin where Shakespeare began, King Lear. So fast intent, take all cares, business from our age, conferring them younger strengths. My Lord Brown, to learned friends, Queen's counsels, and so on, I think you're at this point in time you can count yourself satisfied that when you embark upon your next adventures, you would have imparted the strength to the younger ones of us after a long and illustrious career. If I might make a confession, when asked to make this presentation, I tried to search my own memory as to the occasions on which I appeared before your Lordship. And to my chagrin, here it has been bad luck. There are far too few. My own interaction with you, my Lord, appears to be in the corridors of the court and not inside the court. And yes, you do have a stern veneer. Sometimes people have said it of me that I might tell jokes occasion, and I would try to joke with you. And on each occasion, you reciprocated. And I felt at ease in your presence. And I begin that way by saying that I reached out to members of the Bar Association. And my impression of you is the impression my colleagues is in your presence. I've been told that you display a conviviality, mostly outside of court, I understand. I hear there's dominoes and I hear there's cricket. But also, most importantly, you have set yourself as a defender of the rights of the individual. And I should say this on the few occasions that I recall when I was in the criminal court, because my practice is 99 civil. I have found you to be one of those judges who stood up for the accused, seemed to be looking to ensure that fairness reigned in the particular proceedings before you. It would be remiss of me not to comment that you often displayed a blunt, plain-spoken nature. And I think, my Lord, it was well appreciated by all the counsel who appeared before. You could always tell, I'm told, where Mr. Justice Brown's mind was at from your candor and your, how we say it, way of communicating to counsel at the bench. You are well loved in the West, though from the East, well loved in Hanover, well loved in St. James. And, my Lord, if I might say this, you've been asked by Learned Queen's Counsel, the Director of Public Prosecutions, to consider your memoirs. I'm looking at you, my Lord. I think I see a furrowed brow. You may wish to have assistance in that venture, but I'm asking you, my Lord, to consider it. I think that we need to build up judicial history in a significant way so that the younger generation coming on can, outside of the All England reports, West Indian reports and all of that, they can pick up a work of Jamaican legal history, see what transpired before.
You may not think it, my lord, that there's not enough there to put into a big book. I think differently. So I'd ask your lordship to significantly consider that matter. Let me say this in closing. On behalf of the Jamaican Bar Association, and I'm quoting here, as a chapter closes in your life and a new one starts for you, may your years be filled, all the things you've been looking forward to.
I invite Mr. Hemmings, President of the Commonwealth Bar Association, to speak to us via Zoom from Mr. Brown's look still in the West. Because I think right, Mr. Here electronically as well. A few more. Technology. Ladies and gentlemen, the vagaries of technology is, fortunately, we won't be hearing from in person. Capture what they have to say. Because we have the court report, something that we started with the retirement of the Taylor McCullough and the retirement of the court report in capture the tributes. Get it found. We have anonymous locate all sorts of signed papers to have these done. What we intend to do is begin, in a sense, what Mr. Williams has suggested, capture what is said during these moments, because that is how, for example, would know of Justice Brown's contribution to the court when AD9 spoke. When we have the Jamaican Bar Association dinners, that is how we also give additional histories have begun. So in that way, we'll build up a body of work over time from research at the appropriate refer to together and appropriate. Really continuing on the tradition started and starts, but we had the HVT chambers and the masters, also the work of the late Mr. Raphael Codlin, great Jamaican advocates. Have also had literature on Right Excellent Norman Washington Manley. So slowly but surely, we are gathering our history of the legal profession. We have not yet had any from the perspective of a judge. So Justice Brown and perhaps her ladyship, McCullough, may take up that challenge. But, ladies and gentlemen, we are now here, the Honorable Mr. Justice Brown, as for the last time in this capacity.
Thank you, Chief Justice. May I say, first of all, acknowledge Justice McCullough, my good friend Ken Pantry, my brothers and sister judges. I will say for sure that it was not for Brother Batts, Sister Shelley Williams, who convinced me that I should participate in this exercise today. When I was first asked, I said I wanted to disappear, just like how I came in. To many persons, I am from the St. Thomas. But the truth be told, I grew up in my early days before I was taken to St. Thomas in East Kingston. I remember going to school, the little prep school on Paradise Street. Each day I would see mentally challenged persons, because that time Bellevue bordered Paradise Street. From there, I went to a school at the eastern end of Tower Street, St. Michael's Primary. There again, each day I would see the prisoners as they marched them along Tower Street. What usually amazed me those days was that the strong smell, nice smell of the cornbread that was baked at prison at Tower Street. And each morning when I walked past there or going, I was so short at that time that I thought the key to open the door, that was very big as far as I was concerned, was almost my size. So from early in life, there were two streets that I was accustomed to. Evening, sometime I'd walk to the Institute of Jamaica to see the crocodiles. King Street, Barry Street, and all those streets were very familiar to me. So when I went to St. Thomas to live, I had to go to take the country bus at West Street, or if I needed to go on the diesel to Montego Bay, I'd have to go at the other end of Barry Street. It was only fitting for me every time I look at her and said, I'm going to retire in the middle of Tower Street and Barry Street. As a boy growing up, I was always interested in the law. And one thing that struck me when I went to St. Thomas to live, Port Morant in particular, or a little place I call Stylehouse Crossing, was a sentencing from those days which I couldn't understand. When the little man beside me, the little cultivator, was arrested for a spliff, he had to spend 18 months in prison. And from then, although I will tell people I didn't smoke ganja, And the first time I touched ganja was when I was a prosecutor. But at the same time, I thought it was unjust to have this mandatory sentence. And I still think it is unjust for Parliament to interfere with the discretion of judges to set up mandatory sentences. I also found it incompatible that if I find a man guilty for certain offenses, you're asking me to give a mandatory sentence and then say I must write something to the Court of Appeal to justify why he should not get a lower sentence. I maintain that is wrong. But then I took an oath. As far as I'm concerned, a free press and an independent judiciary is the cornerstone of a constitutional democracy. Throughout my judicial career, and sometime maybe when I was a clerk of the court, I maintain that to be independent, it is the responsibility of the executive to maintain that I get, and all judges get, an adequate salary. And on that basis, and I'll say this, many persons would not have known, not even Mr. Knight, that I spent 6 months at the Ministry of Justice as the personal assistant, the Minister of Justice. That is in between as a deputy. But when I left the ministry, I said I did not know anything about prosecuting. I did not know anything about our system. And I insisted that I should go back to the magistrate's court and then to remain there until I learned something. In truth, growing up, all I wanted to be was a clerk of the court. Because that was every holiday, the clerk of the court would pass my house going to Bath to have court on a Thursday. So that was Mr. Clark going up there. And they had so much respect for the clerk of the court in those days that I wanted to be like one of the clerks. So when I became clerk in St. Thomas, I felt at home. I went to Moranby High School. I also went to Excelsior. I was a Black Power advocate and remain so today. Growing up in St. Thomas, you had to live amongst people. They looked upon my parents for assistance. I had to do the same thing too. And this is why I remain as who I am today, because of my relationship growing up in St. Thomas. I don't go there regularly now, and I've never sat in the parish as a judge, and deliberately so. I spent my years on the other side of the island, As they say, the wise men came from the east, so I went to the west. Valerie Nita Robertson is my batchmate. Maurice Wilson was my very good friend, classmate. Was one of the first person I met when I went to St. Thomas to live. But for his death, I think I would have been in the private practice. Because I intended at one stage to go out into the private world. His death changed every single thing. And that is a fact. So I spent most of my years in St. James, in Westmoreland, and many persons think that I am from that side of the island. Family-wise, my mother was born in Westmoreland. That is it. But I love, and I will say this, by working in the West, or working throughout Jamaica, sometimes I tease the Chief Justice. I said, I will not travel with you, Chief, to go to any parish, because you will take me through some areas that will take me 3 days to travel. He knows what I'm saying, because he finds an alternative route to reach Savlamar than going directly to Black River. But, Chief, again, I'll tell you this. I think we are only 2 judges who walk the corridors regularly. Even before he became Chief Justice, we would meet in the corridors to discuss something. We looked. We knew what was actually happening on the building. But retirement, I told everybody beforehand, so I was preparing myself for retirement. I have no outstanding judgment. I will say to the Minister of Justice now that my judgments were always short. The only judgment that could beat me was that of Justice Dio McIntosh. It was, and it's good to hear these things that is said about me. And one day I was in the gun court, and Miss Jobson, who I always humor, because we on this side knows that she doesn't plead guilty. None of her clients plead guilty. So I would humor her. And one day she said to me, Judge, you know what is your nickname? And you know that every judge have a nickname. You don't believe me, all of us have a nickname. And she said, my nickname was, I am world boss. I said, to Ms. Jobson, a young counsel told me that some months ago. Why was I called world boss? Because when I sit sometime with my colleague judges, they will say to me, you go and deal with that person because I can't get anywhere with them. But once they come before you, things are different. Here, as a judge, each Friday, I sat, have lunch with a number of my colleagues. there in the common room where anything goes. But one thing I always say to them, when you sit on the bench, the decision is yours. No one can tell you what to do. Just follow the rules of evidence. That is all you have to do. And I realize nowadays it's not the accused man who is on trial or the defendant who is on trial. It is the judge who is on trial. Because when we go across the courts of appeal, it is your judgment that they are criticizing. We weren't there. We must try to find the truth. I also read a judge sentencing by the learned Chief Justice recently, when he was in Trelawney, but it was done in St. James, in respect to a lot of scamming. And I think my brother judges and sister judges should read that judgment, because it's something that I have always been saying. Not because Parliament passes a law. When it comes to a lot of scamming, the police find one man, a little youngster, with a lead sheet. Should I send him directly to prison? No. I didn't. Because I maintain that sending you to prison is reserved for certain offenses. I give and I believe that we should look first before we reach to custodial sentence. That should be the last resort. When a man commits a murder, then we expect the citizens to criticize us if we don't give a fair and just sentence. But at the same time, we must remember who we are sentencing. We are sentencing an individual. I don't sentence lawyers. It don't matter whether I like the lawyer or don't like the lawyer. It is the accused. In a lighter note, as when Ken Pantry will say, every day we play dominoes together, he calls one person's name regularly. Miss Reed. That is what it is, Madam Counsel. I acknowledge you. You have been my friend. Mr. Knight, I know sometimes people may believe that we judges take political sides. We don't. I know at Domino's at Braco, you claim that you gave me 6 love. I suspect it's Johnny you gave the 6 love. I also recognize a former minister, Mr. Dorothy Lightburn, who hails from St. Thomas. And Ms. Dora and myself had a very good relationship from the day I was clerk of the court for the parish of St. Thomas. And we went through that the same exercise that you went through with me as a minister. She had to suffer the same fate. Because I believe that when my colleagues ask me a question, for example, they're still asking me the question now, but I won't tell you what the question they're asking me now. Because if it comes to motor car, and they can't get a motor car, they're not going to Chief Justice first, you know. to come into Glenbrown. And in years past by, I found ways in which to speak to the political directorate, how to satisfy judges. And I recall when I got my first motor vehicle, you were the minister at the time. And I was the envy of the bench because I drove a Prado. But then I worked in Westmoreland, and when rain fall, I want to come home. Many people don't understand the life of a judge. We get up 5, 6 o'clock in the morning to drive to some far place, to come back on weekends. And they criticize us. I maintain that the welfare of judges is paramount. Cannot expect us to do things, to see that a justice system operates, and at the same time, don't give us the tools. I recall being in Westmoreland, and I sent a message to you, Minister, ex-Minister, Minister of Justice then, to say that Westmoreland needs a family court. And the response I got from Senator Hamati then was, how can we do it? And I told you how to do it, and that was why Westmoreland ended up having a family court before any other parish. And you gave me the responsibility to find the building, the furnishing, and the staff. And that was how the family court came in Westmoreland. And I can tell you that the people of Westmoreland and the Cornwall Bar thank me for that. They will also tell you that I was the first judge who locked down a courthouse without any repercussion from the political directorate. I went to Bethel Town one morning and there was no bathroom facility. And I said to myself, as a man, I could find a coconut tree. But what would my sister judge do? So I said, we're not going back there. It was an old, dilapidated building. And has remained closed ever since. There was no political recovery. All I got from the Prime Minister one day, where could we find to put a courthouse to satisfy the people? But that was how it was, how I felt. And once I discerned certain things, that is how it would be. Like it was said in this very court that I was called to the bar by Mr. Justice Chambers, we just mentioned, Chief Justice. And I think Justice Patterson was the registrar. And in those days, there were very few females around. Valerie was one, yes. But we took it calling to the bar, literally. Once you were called to the bar in those days, you had to know what to do because you had senior counsels, especially from the English bar, who would guide us because at that stage we were known as the Calypso lawyers. That was how we were treated when we came out. You couldn't even be a clerk of the court those days because most of them were unqualified clerks. And they knew that we wanted their post. It was a matter of time before they would have to give way. But such was life at the bar those days. And I deliberately chose to go to the building across the road. That was where the Attorney General's chambers was. And I enjoyed myself immensely there. As a judge, I have no regrets. Surrounded by many ladies now, because when we came here, there were few in numbers. I suspect there's less than 10 male judges today. But ladies have taken over the profession. And as a mark of respect, I maintain that I enjoyed my role sitting with them each day. I have no regrets coming here. When I hear the things that they say to me at the bar, from the bar, I wonder if the same judge because it is well known that if you make a bail application, I can tell you in 2 minutes whether or not you're going to get bail. That don't make sense you argue with me for 1 day, because you're still not going to get it. If you're going to get bail, you're going to know in 2 minutes. After the prosecution, tell me why they oppose bail. So, judicial time, as far as I was concerned, was very short. If the DPP was here, I wanted to tell her something too. Because when I read or heard over the news about why a certain person should get the same salary like myself, I am saying, and let it be known, that I maintain that when I negotiate, when I write a recommendation for salary, I don't think about other persons. I think about the judge. And I don't say why certain persons should get the same salary as a judge when they're not doing the judge work. And Chief Justice, I owe no apology for having that view. Because we have to work literally 7 days per week, writing judgments. I know some people will be upset with it, but that was how I felt. I don't see why somebody on a commission should be getting robbing allowance when they don't go to court. Yes. Those are the things that Parliament did that I object to. I won't elaborate, but it is well known. In closing, I will say, I see some of my friends. I see some persons who I saw at law school. Sometimes we clash, but I tell people that once I leave the bench, I forget what happened in the courtroom. Michael, as I said before, he graduated 1 year ahead of me, but at the same time, we met in Caville, and we have been friends ever since. Valerie, my friend, is Justice Shelley Williams. I will acknowledge, when I went to Westmoreland first, she was an assistant clerk. Justice Dale Palmer was a clerk of the court when I was in Clarendon. So I know it's time for me to go. Because on the other side of the street, there is the judge over there who I always tease that she was my clerk of the court when I was in Westmoreland. Vivian. So this is when, as Kent would have said before, when a certain lawyer got up before the judge in court and said, when I was at DPP, I taught her everything. And she responded, yes, that is true, but this is where now the student has outstripped the master. So, to my good friend and dear friend, Sarah J., it's good to see her. I remember her from Caville. We were magistrates together. We were clerk of the courts together. I know she's sorry that I'm leaving, but her time will come. One thing I can tell you all is that the reason why I'm here today is because somebody retired. And that was how I look at life. We have to do something, and 10 years down the line, they won't even remember who Justice Glenn Brown was. That is how life is. So what we do, we try to do it good so that some things will remember. And you will remember me when I took off the mask. When I first came on the bench, we hide our head with the wig. Now we are hiding our faces. And in leaving, I'll say to my friends, remember identification. No, because many persons tell me that they see me somewhere when I wasn't there. And know that they have on mask. Always remember, think not once. Don't believe everything the policeman tell you, that he saw the gentleman. Because identification is crucial. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Before Chief, before I have to go home, my daughter is on, one daughter is on Zoom. She's all the way in California. She's an actress. We don't know that being in court, we are actors too. I must say before now that while I'm at home, especially when you have somebody also called to the bar, you have to put up with me. And now it is even worse. Because I maintain I'm not getting out of the bed before 11 o'clock. So they have to pamper me now. But that is all I have to say in acknowledging my daughter, my son, and my foster daughter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I've gotten an insight into the formative years, things that, and events that had an impact on they call the social consciousness of our dear brother, what led him to be sensitive to the needs of persons having that keen sense of justice and fairness. He Justice Donald McIntosh, others like him were swift, decisive, and spoke their minds, spoke free. But our judiciary has been the better for having them. And only just that their memory and the contribution and worth and work in with those of us who are here to continue the job of adjudicating and building the rule of law. You see, Mrs. Brown, the daughter, son, foster daughter, here in court. Maybe for the first time, you are actually in court hearing what it is that your father, your husband has been doing, contribution that it is that he had to be traveling long hours, why it is that he had to be up late at night. These functions are important to let the family understand and appreciate that we thank them for the many sacrifices that they have made over the years, enable them to make the contribution. It is important for you to be hearing this firsthand. Judges, attorneys, from all persons, why he's here to us. So, to you, on behalf of the judiciary, I say thank you very much for the love and support that you give to him, to enable him to do the things that he has done, get the contribution has made. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you all for participating in this very important ceremony. And let me say a personal note that I thank Ben for the support that he has given me as justice. And I would be many years his junior in many ways. I have never felt that he has disrespected the office of Chief Justice because of my, I say, relative youthfulness. And he has always been one to come and make suggestions of various kinds. He was always a very practical, down-to-earth person to how things can be. I wish to thank him publicly for the support that he has given as Chief Justice. So now come to the end ceremony. Let me thank you once again, all counsel present, those who spoke, those who not, but you all came here to recognize and to say things to our brother that you genuinely felt from the heart. Those of us who joined us electronically, thank you very much for your presence and in joining us in honoring Ken Brown. Now ask Registrar